Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second part of our three-part series on the history of EDM wire, together with Chris Frost, Director of Sales and Marketing from Bedra. We are broadcasting here from the Experience Center at Makino's Diamond headquarters in Auburn Hills. So thank you again for attending. And for the agenda today, I believe, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll be talking a little bit about, the history of BERKENHOFF directly, kind of give a summary there, a little bit, the business segments you're in, and then we're going to pivot over into development of EDM wire, what goes into that, and then I believe in the next part of this three-part series, we will be going in more detail into the actual production process.
You're correct, Mark. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you. So let's start. From then to now, a little bit of an overview of bedra, the history, the 21st century, and some of the key figures and business units and the product range. Bedra's history started that it was founded in approximately 1889 by Karl BERKENHOFF. His sons invented the first multiple wire drawing dies around 1893.
And that is the same principle, right, that's being used on the EDM wire manufacturing side of today?
A variation of that principle is being used today. It's a more refined process than what it was then, yes.
Yep.
Yes. In the 60s, Bedra installed an installation of an electroplating system to coat wires.
Is that kind of similar to what's being used with, let's say, the traditionally coated EDM wires? I know they were not around in the mid-60s, they were only developed later, but is it correct to say that that's sort of like the basis for?
This same technology is being used back then to coat other type of wires. It's now being used to plate the wires that we currently use on our machines today. Yes. In 1960, the late 1960s was really the innovation of a copper EDM wire and then a brass EDM wire. Your question of the coated wires, they were introduced in around 1979 for the first electroplated zinc coated wire.
And that was like the Cobra Cut line, which?
That was the Cobra Cut line, yes.
Which is still
It
in
is
use
still
today, and I mean, I believe every EDMer who's watching this and listening to us will be familiar with that name.
Yes, and used on any type of equipment and known for giving some of the best finishes within the industry.
So you can proudly say that you're the Kleenex of EDM?
That's a nice way to put it, but that is true. Or, as it was once said, we were the Budweiser and the Snickers.
Okay, I like that.
Very established. In around 1981, there was a merger between the Merkenbach wire factory and a metal foundry in Kinzenbach. That's what is known as BERKENHOFF, Germany today, these two facilities. In 1990, they constructed new drawing, annealing, and electroplating halls for the next generation or next change in the EDM wires. As we moved on to 2003 was when the first generation of gamma wires was introduced to the United States. BERKENHOFF had one of the patents, and it was under the Topaz brand name.
So that was like really the first iteration of the next generation of coated
The next
wire.
generations of coated wires, yes, sir.
And the benefit of those were?
Increased cutting speeds. Increased cutting speeds and surface finish. So a combination of the two.
Okay.
Yes. Working in cooperation with Makino Applications was the introduction of the Topaz heat wire.
And I think for reference, right, that was developed when we at Makino brought out the dual machines.
The dual machine.
With heat generators.
Yes.
So for again, with the goal of, increasing cutting speeds and
reducing wire consumption at the same time.
Reducing wire consumption, also giving the ability of doing tall cuts, or in bad flushing situations, which is oftentimes really difficult. So what we did there, right, together, develop a wire electrode that was really geared towards supporting the Makino technology.
The Makino technology of the day, yes it was. And in 2014 again, in combination with Makino, the hypercut wire was brought out.
That was, I think, would that be what we kind of consider like a second, third generation?
It was still within the first generation, maybe the early second generation of gamma wires, yes. In 2015, things changed a little bit. BERKENHOFF merged with Ningbo Bode, high-tech company from China. This gave them the ability to be one of the largest foundries in the world. In 2018, when Makino was introducing the new heat extreme machine with the 16,000th wire, once again they come to BERKENHOFF to help develop a wire that would be supported on their new generators.
And I think that was really a drastic pivot away from, let's say, the typical traditional EDM wires as well as machining process, because I think we are reaching sometimes doubling of cutting speeds over regular, let's say, 12,000th wire in very difficult cutting situations. And I believe, and you know that better than I, but producing this thick of an EDM wire is something that had not been achieved previously.
Yes, not only the diameter wire, but the coating of the wire was special. The coating used multiple different technologies in developing the coating for the wire. And as you stated, that the wire was designed to alleviate some of the issues that have been previously seen in the industry with thick, uneven parts, interrupted cuts, and materials that had inclusions in it. It is a wire that was designed so that it wouldn't break. In 2019, maybe a little piggybacking off of the heat technology, the TrimPack EDM wire was developed and introduced to the market. And it's under the latest or fourth generation of EDM wire known as GapStar. And then after that, right now, BERKENHOFF has taken the time to move into other industries and is producing a welding wire, an aluminum welding wire.
So that kind of goes into the other industries that you cover, because, and I think we're briefly going to talk about this, I believe. You don't only do EDM wire, right? There's also other segments.
Right. BERKENHOFF has, since the merger with Ningbo, we have diversified into other products. We have already sold a few other wires for toothbrush and for gun cleaning kits and some other specialty wires. But now we have broadened our scope even further and getting into the welding wires. It all started with one man, Karl BERKENHOFF, the founder of BERKENHOFF, which eventually became BEDRA that we know today. And here we have a picture of the water mill that he purchased in 1889 to innovate his new wire drawing facilities. With here is some history of the plant as it has grown. Some of these pictures date back into the early 1900s all the way up to today. As you can see, the plant, these were probably taken in the 20s or 30s. The facility was very bare, very sparse with equipment. A quick landscape picture of the outside of the mill.
So really in a very rural area.
Yes, a very rural area of Germany.
And
yes.
This section here looks kind of fiery.
Fiery, yes. This is something that we'll look at in some presentations going forward, but this is one of the original smelting facilities, or smelting pots, where they smelted the raw materials to produce the wires.
So you basically just, let's say, if you're talking a brass alloy, you put in your zinc, pure zinc,
And
pure copper, and just smelt it together?
Melt it together, and then cast it into a rod, and then continue through the process of drawing, which, as you see here, shows EDM wire. This pictures here are probably from the 1980s. And as you can see, these are wires, spools full of EDM wire.
So is that already the final diameter that you see there, or is that like more like what was considered once like a pre-draw? Or
This is not an intermediate diameter. This is the final diameter, but it is taken on these spools.
they look really big.
They are very big. They're approximately 300 kilos. And
So 700 pounds, roughly.
approximately 700 pounds. And today, them spools are put into a machine like this. As you can see here, the spools have not changed a whole lot from here to the 2020, 2019, but this is the winding machine that will take this large spool and put it on the small spools that you currently are using in your shop today.
To that extent, I have to say that I'm personally very thankful that bedra is not really making 100-pound spool wires anymore, because I remember those from my early days.
We still have them available if you need them.
Okay, but they're backbreakers.
They are backbreakers, yes sir, they are. Here we have BERKENHOFF in the 21st century. Here we have plant in Kinzenbach, where we do our melting, our continuous casting, our cold rolling, our annealing, and our initial drawing of the material.
And we'll have some video. I think you brought some videos in from the plant.
Yes.
That we'll have in the next section.
In the coming sections, we'll have videos of these processes. And this picture over here is the Merkenbach plant. This is where we do our primary drawing, our annealing, our electroplating, our fine drawing, and even profiling for electronical wires. And just so you're aware, Mark, this is the die house. This is where the dies that are used to draw the wire are built and maintained. So we have that on premises.
That's probably, is that safe to say that that's requires a highly skilled workforce?
Just like the diamond guides for your wire EDM machines, the dies that are used to draw EDM wire are held to the exacting same tolerances. BERKENHOFF has changed in the last 10 years. We now have our main manufacturing facilities have not changed in Germany, but we have facilities in China, in Hong Kong, and Vietnam that are capable of producing quality EDM wires also. And then, of course, our facility in South Carolina, where we stock and deliver the product to the end users and the distribution networks. With the merger between Bodai High-Tech and BERKENHOFF in 2015, they combined R&D with the manufacturing on a global scale to rename the companies bedra. The name bedra comes out of the name of BERKENHOFF and Draft, with Draft being the German word for wire. Or we now produce not only spark erosion wire, or EDM wire, but also welding and brazing wire, and electronics and special applications wires. This is just a few figures, facts, a little bit of data about BERKENHOFF. We currently have about 385 people within the organization, within Germany alone. This is not counting the Vietnamese plant, the plant in China, nor the United States operation. And we currently produce over 100 alloys. Some of the fun figures or data about wire being produced by the BERKENHOFF facilities is every year approximately 30 million kilometers of precision wire made with over 100 different alloys leaves our facilities. If you really think about that, that's almost 80 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon.
That's a lot. And now, looking, at all of that wire from the perspective of an EDMer and a wire EDM user, what needs to go into making, right, these 30 million kilometers, 20 million miles of wire, like every inch and section of that? How?
We're going to go into this in some other slides, but just a quick description is the quality control from the inception of the raw materials through the induction of the wire being drawn to pre-manufacturing size, all the way to the final draws. The quality steps and the inspection steps along the way will guarantee that we could say almost 1 million spools of wire are consistent so that they do not give you problems on your machines or in the middle of your jobs.
And what problems could result, let's say, if you have impurities in the raw material or some variations during the drawing process or the winding process?
Oh, there's a lot of different problems that can arise with that. If you have impurities, it could be wire breaks, with your wire breaking at inopportune moments in the cut. If the consistency of the coating is not there, you could have lines in your parts. If the coating does not adhere correctly to the core material, you could have dirty wire or dirty parts of your machine where your maintenance has to be increased.
And the dirt would be kind of like coating flaking off?
Would be the coatings flaking off, yes. Or residue from other parts of the manufacturing process. So the business units that Bedra now has today, of course, the core unit for Germany is the Bedra EDM, where we produce both brass and coated wires. The welding, which is something that is recent for welding and brazing wires. Profiled wires for electronics, which Bedra has been doing for years out of their German facility. Anchor wires, and special resistance wires for springs, bolts, jewelry, wine bottles. Very many different applications. This shows us a little bit of the sales structure by region. 41% of the company's business is EDM, 35% ELOS, 24% is welding. And then the world picture, you can see that America is about 15% of Bedra Germany's overall business. And this is just to touch on a little bit on the product range, from copper with low alloyed copper wires to brass wires, tin bronze wire, nickel silver wires, copper clad wires, and aluminum wires.
If I may ask, right, because not all of these obviously are used in the EDM. So from an EDM perspective, which ones of these segments are the ones that are relevant?
The relevant segments here would be the copper and low copper alloyed wires. Of course, the brass wires, which is a foundation for most of the EDM wires that we see out there today. And then the copper clad or steel wires, which is very special wires for doing micro EDMing and fine wire EDMing.
So those would be oftentimes wires that are used, I don't know, is it like in medical applications or?
Medical, electronics, connectors, a lot of the micro stuff that we currently see today that makes our life so easy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris, for this overview of, Bedra, our business units, etc. But now I think we are going to pivot to more the EDM manufacturing process, the R&D process, and the development of the products. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're going to touch base on a few different items, starting with just, again, a quick overview, the driver for excellence, our research and development, our application service, our product production and quality, and how that benefits the customers. So we want to kind of touch base on all of this. Mm-hmm. So start out the drivers for our excellence in EDM wire. We have our own R&D department for over 4 decades. Our EDM application center has been there for 2 decades. Our production of EDM wire for over 5 decades. And the cooperation with OEMs and research entities and educational entities for over 4 decades gives us the excellence that we need to be a world leader in the production of EDM wire. Our Competence and R&D Center, where we do our research and development, it's been there since the beginning or the introduction of EDM wire in the late 60s, early 70s. We've been a pioneer with all the generations of EDM wire through the years. We've developed more than 30 different wire types through the years for various applications. We have leading products accepted by many OEMs worldwide in all applications categories. We have cooperation with many OEMs in developing wire for their machines.
Like, with Makino, right, we developed Topaz heat, the heat wire for the heat generator. We developed hypercut wire together.
Yes.
And also then, most recently, the heat extreme wire.
Heat extreme wire,
the
absolutely.
16,000 wire.
And look forward to developing the next generation of wires when your next generation of machines come out. We have cooperation with many renowned research institutes, not only in Europe, but throughout the world. Our R&D center is something that really nobody else that produces wire has. We have extensive test equipment, which includes an SEM and an EDX. The 40 to 60 years of knowledge, with many of our employees being there for 30 plus years, gives us a know-how in the fundamentals of EDM.
Now, the testing equipment that you mentioned, right, that's being used in R&D and maybe also in QA, I would assume. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but SEM, is that the electron microscope?
The scanning electron microscope,
okay.
Yes.
So that's where you can really go deep down into the detail.
Deep down into it, yes.
Of the wire surface, the coding analysis, etc. That helps you really combine the physics of the wire with the performance of the wire.
Yes.
And how to mate that with a generator of a machine and the machine's
Not only does it do that, Mark, but it also allows us to check the wire to make certain that from one batch to the other, that it is very consistent in the structure of the wire itself.
And the EDX, do I understand that correctly, that gives you an analysis of all, right, basically all the raw materials that are in there, essentially like ensuring the purity and that there are no impurities in
Purity of the wire, and to make certain that the mixtures of the raw materials is correct for the final thing. And this is very important for the coatings of the wires so that they run right with the generators that are out there today.
Okay.
BERKENHOFF holds numerous patents worldwide for many different types of EDM wires, some that are produced and some that will never be produced. They've optimized and robust production technologies. I will say this, that when I visited the plant 6 months ago, what I seen in the early 2000s to today completely amazed me at how much the technology had changed and how things are done more efficiently and faster, and they produce the same results and the same quality products that they did 30 years ago. There's more than 130 years experience in just working with copper wires, or the core materials for the EDM wires. This is an interesting chart, Mark. It kind of talks about what does our competence in our R&D, how our management looks at projects. And they usually come from an end user, be it an OEM, or be it a large or a small customer that's having a problem or trying to cut a new space-age material or something that's just developed.
So, for instance, like when we're looking here at the ID block, that could be Makino coming to you and asking for a 0.4 millimeter 16,000 wire electrode, something that had never been done before, but with certain specifications.
That can take this much energy, that's going to run at this type of a speed, that's going to be able to perform in these types of conditions within the gap Yes.
Can be auto-threaded.
Auto-threaded.
All of these things
Yeah.
that kind of are important to make the wire EDM process effective, right? So you don't have to have an operator stand next to the machine.
Right.
And
To make a wire with the characteristics that is going to run day in and day out on the applications that you have chosen to use it in.
yeah.
And of course, we go through a proposal with this, planning, testing of the final solution, the development, the approval. So this process takes time. It's not an overnight process. Sometimes this process can take a year. Sometimes it can take longer. And as you see here with this chart, it kind of shows us the life cycle of a product. That, you know, we do the feasibility, the basic. We develop it, we invest in it, we let it grow for a while, and then it starts to fade off as technology changes. Competence, again, the Application Center. This, again, is another very unique part of BERKENHOFF bedra. We have a laboratory that has 5 state-of-the-art EDM machines in it. So not only do we develop the wire, but we have the ability in-house to run the wire, to see how the wire produces. Or if one of your customers has problems with the spool of wire, not only we can do the chemical analysis, the photomicrographs of that wire, but we can put that wire on a machine very similar to what that customer was running to see how the wire runs and how it works. We have experienced technicians within the facility. They're ex-applications engineers that run the wire EDM machines. Very good at troubleshooting. If we have a problem, or if you have a problem that your applications team can't answer, they can pick up the phone and call, or they can go online to the bedra website and get an answer for if they're having a problem with their wires. We will help develop cutting technology for certain jobs and certain applications. And we do product training where not only do we train salespeople, but also end users on the proper usage, storage, and care of their EDM wires.
So, Chris, thank you again for joining me here and giving us, further overview. This was like the second part of our 3-part series. Thank you all for attending. I'd like to, point you to the Q&A that we're going to have right after this, a live Q&A. But on the top right of your screen, if you take a look at the Q&A box, click on that, and then down on the bottom right of your screen, you can enter questions. And Chris and I will do our best to answer those. If you're not participating live, please feel free to drop us an email or give us a call, and we are happy to answer all questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mark, for having us here today.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you again. And we got a couple of questions for you. And the first one I got is from a viewer who asked, what was the driving factor to move from brass to coated wires? And I think you mentioned it was in the late 70s.
Speed and efficiency, and the improvement of the new generators back then, Mark.
So what would have happened, let's say, if people just ran standard brass on those generators?
The speed would not have been there.
Okay.
The machines wouldn't have been able to perform to what they were developed to perform, their peak performance.
Okay, excellent. Then got one more here. Why aren't there like pure copper EDM wires in the field? Thinking that copper would be highly conductive material.
There is pure copper wire still made and still used on some old generation machines. Due to the copper makeup, it's not efficient on the newer generators. We would have problems with the wire breaking. The power settings would be different. So it's just used, again, you usually see this on machines that were produced '83 and back, maybe.
So
And I may be off on that by a couple of years, Mark.
Mhm.
But the demand for that wire is very limited, and there's very few people that use it.
Okay, that makes sense. And so the last question I have right now is what about molybdenum wire?
Molybdenum, what about molybdenum wire?
Well, is that something that Bedra makes, or
No.
if not, why not? It's still being used.
Bedra has gone a different route on that wire, to be very honest with you. And they have gone with a con-free wire, which is a nickel-plated wire. The moly wires, of course, as a lot of people know, they don't plate back on a machine. And Bedra has decided that's not a product that they draw or they care to produce at this time. They want to stick with their standard, what they really know.
Okay. So it's just not the level of expertise around that product.
No.
Okay. All right. I think that's all we have in terms of questions. So I wanted to thank everybody again. And if you are watching a recording of this, you see Chris's and my contact information here on the screen. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And everybody have a good afternoon. Chris, thank you again.
Mark, thank you, and Makino and SST for having us.
Okay.
Everyone stay safe.
Thank you.